The Forgotten Heir, dear esteemed audience, today we invite you to immerse yourselves in The Forgotten Heir, a poignant tale that begins where most fairy tales end, not with a happy birth, but with a heart-wrenching abandonment. Witness the extraordinary journey of Liam, discarded by a powerful, wealthy family due to illness, only to be lovingly raised by a compassionate scavenger. As he rises against all odds, healed and brilliant, his past resurfaces threatening to unravel the life he built. Will he reclaim his lost legacy, or will the profound love of his adoptive mother guide his ultimate choice? Prepare for a story of resilience, redemption, and the true meaning of family. Before we begin, please consider subscribing and liking to support our channel. The sterile gleam of the hospital lights was a stark contrast to the storm brewing within the Huang dynasty's opulent penthouse. Outside, the city of skyscrapers, a testament to the Huang's vast influence, glittered like scattered diamonds. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of antiseptics and an unspoken dread that even the most expensive air purifiers couldn't dispel. Liam was born amidst this deceptive calm, not with a triumphant cry, but a faint, almost imperceptible whimper. A whimper that, to the discerning ears of his parents, echoed a future of imperfection and whispered of a disease that defied their meticulously crafted image of invincibility. Mr. Huang, a man whose gaze could bend steel and whose word could move markets, stood by the incubator, his usually unyielding face a mask of strained composure. Beside him, Mrs. Huang, a paragon of beauty and grace, clutched her silken robe, her knuckles white. The doctor's hushed diagnosis hung heavy in the air, a death knell to their dynasty's flawless facade, a rare debilitating illness, a lifelong shadow that would cling to their heir. For the Huangs, perfection wasn't just a preference. It was a currency, a birthright. A sick child, a vulnerable heir, was a crack in their impenetrable fortress, a whispered scandal that could erode their meticulously built empire from within. The decision, chilling in its swift, cold logic, was made. In a room too quiet for such a monumental betrayal, the vast wealth, the political leverage, the generations of power, none of it could erase the doctor's grim prognosis. So, on a night as black as their conscience, under the cloak of secrecy and a sky indifferent to human suffering, baby Liam was taken from the Huang dynasty's private hospital wing. He was not taken home to a gilded crib, but to the cold, impersonal steps of an orphanage on the outskirts of the city, a place where forgotten dreams and discarded hopes often found their final resting place. His tiny hand, no bigger than a rose petal, flailed weakly against the crisp white blanket that swaddled him. A silent plea swallowed by the vast, indifferent night. Hours later, as the first tendrils of dawn painted the sky in hues of bruised purple and gray, a familiar stooped figure shuffled through the pre-dawn gloom. Mrs. Lan, a woman whose life was a tapestry woven from the discarded remnants of others, pushed her rickety cart, its wheels groaning in protest against the uneven pavement. Her face, etched with the wisdom of 1,000 hardships, was a roadmap of resilience. Every day, she navigated the labyrinthine alleys and forgotten corners of the city, sifting through the refuse of the privileged, searching for something, anything, that could be repurposed, reused, given a second chance. Her hands, gnarled and calloused, had salvaged countless treasures from the trash, broken toys, forgotten books, dented pots. But never, in all her years, had she found something so utterly precious, so heartbreakingly fragile. There, nestled, among the shadows of the orphanage's stone wall, was a bundle. A tiny whimper, barely audible above the urban hum, drew her closer. As she gently peeled back the blanket, a gasp escaped her lips. A baby, a newborn, his skin as delicate as tissue paper, his eyes, barely open, a startling blue. A pang, sharp and immediate, pierced through her heart. This wasn't refuse. This was a life, abandoned. His small body trembled, a faint cough echoing the doctor's grim diagnosis. He was clearly unwell, and the realization brought a fresh wave of despair. yet also a fierce protective instinct. Mrs. Lon, with no wealth but her boundless compassion, made a decision that defied logic and convention. She couldn't leave him. She simply couldn't. With trembling hands, she scooped the fragile bundle into her arms, the warmth of his tiny body a stark contrast to the coldness of the world that had cast him aside. His eyes, now fully open, stared up at her, a silent question in their depths. In that moment, a profound bond, deeper than blood, was forged. She named him Liam, a name that felt as sturdy and hopeful as the single, struggling wildflower that often pushed through the cracks in the pavement near her humble abode. Life with Liam was a struggle, a constant tightrope walk between hunger and survival. Mrs. Lan traded her meager salvaged findings for medicine, for milk, for anything that might ease Liam's suffering. She brewed traditional herbal remedies, humming lullabies that carried the weight of her love and desperation. Days bled into nights, filled with sleepless hours spent cradling the boy, whispering promises of a better tomorrow. Against all odds, defying every medical prediction, Liam's frail body began to mend. The coughs lessened, the fever subsided, and slowly, miraculously, he grew stronger. It was as if the sheer force of Mrs. Lan's unwavering love had become a potent antidote nourishing him back to health. As Liam grew, so too did his understanding of the world around him. He saw Mrs. Lan's weathered hands, the calluses that spoke of tireless labor, the lines around her eyes that crinkled with every smile. He saw the worn fabric of her clothes, the sparse but meticulously clean home she provided, and the unwavering belief in his potential that shone in her gaze. He learned resilience from her quiet strength, empathy from her boundless kindness, and the invaluable lesson that true wealth lay not in gold, but in the depths of human connection. He immersed himself in books, devouring knowledge like a starving man, his mind a sponge soaking up every detail, driven by a silent vow to repay the immense debt of gratitude he owed this remarkable woman. The world outside the Hoang dynasties, gilded cages, the world of concrete jungles and forgotten dreams, had ironically nurtured a brilliant mind and a compassionate heart. Liam, the discarded shadow, was growing into a beacon of light, utterly unaware of the powerful family who, on a whim of fear and pride, had condemned him to a life they deemed beneath them. As Mrs. Lan tucked him into his makeshift bed one evening, gently smoothing his dark hair, a faint, almost imperceptible hum resonated in the air. It was the distant thrum of the city, a lullaby of indifference and opportunity, carrying within it the unspoken promise of a reunion that would shake two worlds, one built on privilege, the other on profound love. And for now Liam, drifting off to sleep with a book clutched to his chest, remained blissfully unaware of the looming shadows and the distant echo of a name he didn't know, a name that was, in fact, his own. The morning sun, usually a painter of dusty, muted hues on the alleys Liam knew so well, now seemed to gleam with a fierce, almost blinding intensity as he stepped onto the manicured lawns of Aurora University. This wasn't just a change of scenery, it was a cosmic shift, a chasm separating his past from a future he was determined to sculpt with his own hands. The scholarship, a golden ticket forged from countless late nights under a flickering bulb, felt both like a miracle and a heavy mantle. It was a testament to Mrs. Lan's unwavering faith, a silent promise he carried in every beat of his heart. Liam's early days at Aurora were a kaleidoscope of sensory overload. The sprawling campus, an architectural marvel of glass and steel, felt like a gleaming, self-contained city compared to the humble dwelling he shared with Mrs. Lan. Students moved with an effortless confidence, their laughter echoing through sunlit courtyards, their expensive clothes a stark contrast to his own well-worn, carefully mended garments. He was an outsider, a lone star in a galaxy of constellations, but his intellectual hunger burned brighter than any social anxiety. The lecture halls, hushed and reverent, were his sanctuary. In the complex dance of algorithms and the intricate logic of coding, he found a language that transcended social strata, a playground for his brilliant mind. He didn't just learn, he absorbed, he dissected, he reimagined. His notebooks, filled with intricate diagrams and lines of elegant code, were like secret diaries, whispering of innovations yet to be born. It was in one of these bustling campus cafes, amidst the clatter of porcelain and the murmur of conversation, that Mia first entered his orbit. She was a whirlwind of vibrant energy, her laughter like wind chimes, her eyes, a striking shade of amber, sparkling with intelligence and a mischievous wit. Liam, usually a quiet observer, found himself drawn into her orbit, a moth to a captivating flame. Mia, unlike many of her privileged peers, possessed an earthy charm, an aversion to pretense that was both refreshing and disarming. She was undeniably beautiful, with a cascade of dark, silky hair and a style that was effortlessly chic, yet she carried no air of superiority. Their initial interactions were tentative, a dance of polite exchanges that slowly, almost imperceptibly, blossomed into genuine camaraderie. They bonded over obscure scientific theories, shared a disdain for pretentious academic jargon, and discovered a mutual passion for late-night coffee-fueled study sessions. Mia, a rising star in the university's business and economics department, possessed a sharp mind that complemented Liam's analytical prowess. She spoke of ethical business practices, of using wealth for positive change, and her idealism resonated deeply with Liam's own values, instilled by Mrs. Lan. He saw in her a kindred spirit, a soul that, despite her privileged background, seemed to grasp the complexities of the world with an open heart. He never spoke of his past, of the streets, of the constant hum of poverty. It was a secret he guarded fiercely, a fragile shield against judgment. Mia, too, had her own unspoken burdens. There was a subtle tension in her occasional remarks about her family, a faint shadow that flickered across her face whenever the topic of the Huang dynasty, a name that often permeated conversations on campus, a titan of industry, arose. But Liam, engrossed in the burgeoning warmth of their friendship, failed to connect these fleeting shadows to anything more significant. Life, for a fleeting period, settled into a rhythm that felt almost harmonious. Liam's grades soared, his name whispered among professors as a prodigy in the making. His project for a prestigious tech startup competition, a revolutionary AI-driven system for waste management that combined efficiency with environmental sustainability, began to take shape. It was a homage to Mrs. Lan, a quiet rebellion against the world's discarded waste, a symbolic gesture of turning the forgotten into something valuable. He poured his soul into it, fueled by the memory of Mrs. Lan's calloused hands sorting. Through refuse, her back bent, but her spirit unbroken. Then the world tilted on its axis. A phone call, jarring and sudden, ripped through the quiet solitude of his dorm room. Mrs. Lan. Her voice, usually a comforting balm, was thin, strained, laced with a tremor of pain he had never heard before. "Liam, my boy, I'm not well." The words, though few, carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken fears. He rushed home, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The sight of Mrs. Lan, frail and withered in her bed, was a punch to the gut. The vibrant spark in her eyes, usually so resilient, had dimmed. The local doctor's diagnosis was stark, brutal, a rapidly progressing lung disease requiring immediate, expensive surgery, a surgery that would cost a fortune, a sum that loomed over them like an insurmountable mountain. The scholarship covered tuition, not medical emergencies. The meager savings Mrs. Lan had painstakingly accumulated over decades were a mere droplet in an ocean of medical bills. Desperation, cold and metallic, filled Liam's throat. He sat by her bedside, holding her fragile hand, the familiar scent of antiseptic now a cruel reminder of his helplessness. "I'll find the money, Mother. I promise." His voice was a raw whisper, laced with a fear he refused to show. Mrs. Lan, with a weak smile, gently squeezed his hand. "My boy, your health, your dreams, that's all the money I need." But her words, meant to comfort, only intensified the burning resolve within him. He had to save her. She had given him life, a second chance, a foundation of love. He would not let her go. The tech startup competition, once a distant dream, now transformed into an urgent, desperate quest. The grand prize, a substantial investment and global recognition, became his only hope. He threw himself into his project with a renewed, almost manic intensity. Sleep became a luxury, food an afterthought. The lines of code blurred into a frantic dance on his screen, each keystroke a prayer. Mia, noticing his sudden change, his haunted eyes, approached him. "Liam, you look like you haven't slept in days," she observed, her voice soft with concern. "Is everything all right?" He hesitated, then the dam broke. The words tumbled out, raw and unedited, about Mrs. Lan, about the surgery, about the crushing weight of medical debt. Mia listened, her amber eyes wide with genuine sympathy. "Oh, Liam, I'm so sorry. Is there anything at all I can do?" Her sincerity was a balm, a lifeline in the suffocating darkness. "The competition? The prize money. It's the only way." He looked at her, his desperation laid bare. "I have to win, Mia, I have to." A flicker of an idea crossed Mia's face, a slight hesitation, then a determined nod. "You will, Liam. Your project is brilliant. And maybe I can help. My family has connections, resources, not for the prize, but for other things. Research, perhaps, or even just a quiet word in the right ear." Her words hung in the air, a subtle shift in their dynamic. Liam felt a strange sense of unease, a fleeting intuition that her connections might run deeper than he imagined. Yet the urgency of Mrs. Lan's situation overshadowed any nascent suspicion. He simply nodded, gratitude a bitter taste in his mouth. He knew nothing of her family's name, of the whispered stories of the Huang dynasty and their vast, impenetrable network. He knew nothing of the subtle, almost imperceptible threads that connected their seemingly disparate lives. The Huangs, meanwhile, driven by a gnawing regret and a desperate need to secure their legacy, had quietly set their own investigation into motion. Their search, fueled by a deep-seated fear for their failing heir, Mark, had begun to yield fragmented clues. They were looking for a ghost, a lost son, a shadow from their past, and as Liam, driven by love and desperation, polished his groundbreaking AI, preparing to step onto the grand stage of the competition, he was unknowingly drawing closer to the very people who had discarded him, a moth unknowingly flying towards a burning flame. The stage was set, not just for a competition, but for a revelation that would shatter the fragile peace of his world, unraveling a past he never knew existed, and intertwining his destiny with the very dynasty that had cast him aside like an unwanted shadow. The light from under the bridge was about to collide with the dazzling, yet deceptive glow of power. While Liam plunged headfirst into the crucible of the tech competition, fueled by the raw, desperate hope of saving Mrs. Lan, an entirely different kind of storm was raging within the gilded cages of the Huang dynasty. The magnificent Huang mansion, a fortress of granite and glass, now felt like a mausoleum. Its grandeur, once a symbol of their untouchable power, now merely highlighted the cavernous emptiness at its core. Mr. Huang, a man whose presence usually commanded unwavering respect, now carried the subtle slump of defeat in his shoulders. Mrs. Huang, her once vibrant beauty now subtly etched with lines of worry, moved through their lavish home like a ghost. Their last remaining son, Mark, was not merely a disappointment, he was an active corrosion, a gaping wound in the dynasty's otherwise polished facade. Mark, a young man who viewed inherited wealth as an endless playground, squandered fortunes on fleeting pleasures, his days a blur of high-stakes gambling, extravagant parties, and increasingly dangerous associates. His eyes, once mirroring the Huang ambition, were now dulled by apathy, reflecting only the fleeting gleam of illicit thrills. He was a broken vessel, incapable of carrying the weight of their empire, and his self-destructive path was a relentless, silent executioner of their legacy. The profound regret, a viper that had lain dormant for 2 decades, now coiled tightly around their hearts. They had sought perfection, and in doing so had sacrificed a child to a sterile ideal. Now, Faced with the crushing reality of Mark's ineptitude and the looming threat to their dynasty, the ghost of the son they had abandoned resurfaced, a phantom limb that throbbed with agonizing remorse. "We made a mistake," Mrs. Huang would whisper, her voice thin, fragile. "A terrible, unforgivable mistake." Mr. Huang, a man who rarely admitted error, could only nod, his gaze distant, haunted by the image of a tiny, innocent bundle. Driven by a desperation that transcended their usual pride, they initiated a covert search. No expense was spared. Private investigators, once tasked with burying corporate secrets, were now deployed to unearth a long-lost truth. The process was slow, painstaking, sifting through 20 years of fragmented records, vague hospital reports, and hushed rumors. Each passing day without a lead intensified their agony, a stark contrast to Liam's own frantic race against time. Just as the Huang's investigation began to yield whispers of an obscure orphanage and a mysterious adoption, a seismic tremor shook the tech world. The Aurora Tech startup competition climaxed in a dazzling display of innovation. Liam, despite the gnawing anxiety for Mrs. Lan, stepped onto the stage, a quiet force amidst the dazzling lights and buzzing anticipation. His project, EcoFlow AI, was unveiled with a quiet confidence that belied his humble origins. It was more than just an application. It was a vision, a sophisticated AI system capable of analyzing waste streams, optimizing recycling, and even predicting environmental needs with astonishing accuracy. It promised a future where the forgotten waste of humanity could be transformed into valuable resources, a metaphor for his own life. The judges, a panel of seasoned venture capitalists and tech titans, leaned forward, captivated. The audience, a mix of students, faculty, and industry leaders, buzzed with excitement. Liam's presentation was crisp, intelligent. His passion for the project radiating from him like a gentle, unwavering flame. He spoke not of profit, but of purpose, of a cleaner world, of giving back to the community that had raised him. When the final verdict was announced, a collective gasp rippled through the auditorium before erupting into thunderous applause. Liam had won. The grand prize, a monumental investment, enough to save Mrs. Lan, and global recognition that would catapult his name into the annals of technological innovation. The news spread like wildfire. Liam, the underdog genius from Aurora, became an overnight sensation. His face, once obscured by the shadows of poverty, now graced the digital pages of tech magazines and news portals. It was this widespread coverage that finally brought Liam's image into the hushed, anxious confines of the Huang mansion. Mrs. Huang, scrolling through a newsfeed, gasped, dropping her tablet. "It's him, Henry! It has to be him!" Mr. Huang rushed over, his eyes scanning the image of the young man on the screen. The sharp intellect, the determined jawline, a faint flicker of familiarity in the eyes that seemed to pierce through the pixels. A jolt, electric and terrifying, shot through him. The boy they had abandoned, the one they had deemed imperfect, was not only alive but thriving, a phoenix risen from the ashes of their neglect. And he was brilliant, more brilliant than Mark could ever hope to be. The Huang dynasty, ever strategic, saw not just a long-lost son, but an opportunity to secure their legacy, to mend the gaping hole Mark had torn in their future. They approached Liam not as a father seeking a lost child, but as an anonymous investment firm, interested in his groundbreaking EcoFlow AI. The name of their conglomerate was deliberately withheld, a thin veil of secrecy designed to probe and observe before making their grand reveal. "Mr. Liam, your project is truly exceptional." A smooth, authoritative voice crackled through Liam's phone. It was Mr. Davis, the Huang dynasty's chief legal counsel and a master of corporate espionage. "Our firm is deeply impressed. We believe EcoFlow AI has the potential to revolutionize the industry. We'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss a potential partnership." Liam, still reeling from the competition win and the urgent need to arrange, Mrs. Lan's surgery agreed. He was pragmatic. Any investment was a lifeline. But a subtle tremor of unease rippled through him. The firm's interest felt too intense, their knowledge of his project too intimate, almost as if they knew more than they let on. This unease, a whisper of a forgotten past, ignited a spark of curiosity within him. He started to ask questions, digging subtly into the background of this mysterious investment firm, a habit born from years of meticulously analyzing data. His research led him down a rabbit hole of corporate records, shell companies, and intertwined directorships, all pointing to a singular, colossal entity, the Huang dynasty. The name hung in the air, a familiar, yet distant echo from campus whispers, a titan of industry. Why would such a powerful family, one he'd heard about in hushed tones of awe and occasional resentment from Mia, be so interested in a project from a scholarship student? The pieces began to click into place, unsettlingly. He remembered Mia's fleeting shadows, her veiled comments about her family, the subtle tension when the Huang name came up. A cold, sharp realization began to form in his mind, chilling him to the bone. One evening, after another long day at the hospital, Liam sat, poring over old newspaper clippings he'd painstakingly unearthed from a dusty archive. An article from 2 decades ago, a society column celebrating the birth of the Huang's first son, caught his eye. A faded photograph accompanied the text, a smiling Mrs. Huang holding a tiny, bundled infant. Then, a smaller, almost hidden detail, a subsequent brief announcement of the child's severe illness and the family's retreat from public life. His gaze lingered on the infant's face, a striking resemblance to his own baby pictures, the ones Mrs. Lan had lovingly kept, tucked away in a worn shoebox. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drum against the silence of the night. It couldn't be. The sheer improbability of it, yet the evidence, cold and undeniable, began to stack up. The timing, the disease, the Huang dynasty's sudden interest in him, Mia's subtle evasions. It was a mosaic of fragmented clues, now coalescing into a horrifying, breathtaking picture. The wealthy, powerful family that now sought to invest in him. They were the same family who had discarded him like a broken toy. He found Mia in the university library, her head buried in a textbook. He approached her, his voice a low, controlled rumble. "Mia," he began, "your family. The Huang dynasty. Tell me about them." Mia's head snapped up, her amber eyes widening. A flicker of alarm, quickly masked, crossed her face. "Why are you asking, Liam? What's this about?" Her voice was laced with a defensiveness he hadn't heard before. "Because," Liam said, his voice rising, a tremor of accusation in it, "I think they're looking for someone, and I think that someone might be me." He laid out the evidence, piece by agonizing piece, the anonymous investor, the coincidences, the old news articles. Mia's composure cracked, her face draining of color as he spoke. The truth, raw and brutal, hung between them, a tangible weight. Her silence, the sudden, frantic tremor in her hands, was all the confirmation he needed. "Mia," he pressed, his voice barely a whisper. Are you a Huang?" Her gaze dropped, unable to meet his. A single tear tracked a path down her cheek. I am," she choked out, her voice barely audible. "My full name is Mia Huang." The revelation was a punch to the gut, a betrayal that cut deeper than any physical pain. His friend, his confidant, the one person he had trusted with his rawest vulnerabilities, was a part of the very family who had condemned him to a life of poverty, had orphaned him in all but name. The world, which had just begun to offer him a glimpse of hope, now spun violently, tearing apart the fragile threads of his newfound security. The light from under the bridge, once a beacon, now seemed to cast the longest, darkest shadows, revealing a past he never knew, and a sister he never had. The stage was set, not just for a reunion, but for a confrontation that would tear apart the meticulously constructed facades of the Huang dynasty and force Liam to face the ultimate question of identity and belonging. The Huang mansion, typically a fortress of hushed grandeur, now thrummed with a brittle tension. Liam, his mind a whirlwind of anger, hurt, and an unsettling curiosity, stood before his biological parents. The meeting was arranged not in a luxurious drawing room, but in Mr. Hong's study, a room designed for strategic maneuvers, not raw, emotion. The air hung thick with unspoken words, a suffocating silence broken only by the distant chime of an antique clock. Mr. Huang, his face etched with a desperate hope, began, "Liam, son, we've been looking for you for so long. We made a terrible mistake." His voice, usually resonating with authority, was now a fragile tremor. Mrs. Huang, elegant even in her distress, reached out a trembling hand, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Please, Liam, give us a chance. We regret every day of it." Liam stared at them, his gaze cold, unwavering. He saw not parents but architects of his abandonment. The opulent surroundings, the expensive clothes, the carefully constructed facade of remorse. It all felt like an insult. "Mistake?" He finally spoke, his voice dangerously quiet, each word a hammer blow. "You call discarding a sick child, leaving him to die on the streets, a mistake? What kind of mistake is that, Mr. Huang? What kind of parents do that?" His eyes, once full of the light of discovery, now held the searing intensity of a burning accusation. A shudder ran through Mrs. Huang. "We were desperate, Liam, terrified. The doctors, they said you wouldn't survive. We were told you would be a burden, a stain on our legacy." Her words, meant as an explanation, only fueled his indignation. A stain? So, my life, my very existence, was a mark on your precious reputation? He laughed, a short, bitter sound that echoed the emptiness within him. While you were protecting your legacy, a scavenger, a woman who picked through the refuse of your world, was picking me up. She gave me life, she gave me love, she gave me everything you denied me. You were too busy polishing your gilded cage to see a real human being. Mr. Huang flinched, his face paling. "We know we owe you, Liam. We want to make amends. Everything we have, it can be yours. The dynasty, the fortune, it's all waiting for you." He gestured around the room, as if the very walls could convey the magnitude of their offer. "My inheritance was earned with scraped knees and empty bellies, not silver spoons," Liam retorted, his voice rising. "My inheritance is the love of a woman who chose me when you chose to abandon me. And what about her? What about Mrs. Lan? Does your amends extend to the woman who nursed your burden back to health? The woman who sacrificed everything so that your stain could live?" His demand hung in the air, a challenge. Mr. Huang hesitated, a flicker of calculation in his eyes. Publicly acknowledging Mrs. Lan, a common scavenger, would be a monumental blow to their carefully cultivated image. "We can provide discreet compensation for her," Mr. Huang offered, his voice slightly strained. Liam's jaw tightened. "Discreet? No. If you want to make amends, it will be public. An apology, an acknowledgement, and compensation that truly reflects the life she gave me, the sacrifices she made." He stood his ground, unyielding as a mountain. He wasn't asking for money for himself. He was demanding justice for the woman who had truly been his mother. He was the product of two vastly different worlds, and he intended to force the Huangs to acknowledge the worth of the one they had scorned. The tension in the room was palpable. Mr. Huang's usual poker face crumbled, revealing a raw vulnerability. He looked at his wife, then back at Liam, seeing not just his lost son, but a reflection of the integrity and strength they had so carelessly discarded. "All right," Mr. Huang conceded, his voice barely a whisper, a monumental admission of defeat. "We will make a public apology, and we will ensure Mrs. Lan is compensated for her unwavering care." Just as a fragile sense of resolution began to settle, the door creaked open, and Mark sauntered in, a half-empty glass of amber liquid in his hand. His eyes, bleary and resentful, immediately fixated on Liam. "Well, well, look what the cat dragged in," Mark sneered, his voice slurred. "So this is the long-lost genius? Here to steal my inheritance, are you?" Liam's gaze hardened. He had heard about Mark, the current heir, the prodigal son who was bleeding the dynasty dry. He saw not a rival, but a mirror of the very emptiness the Huangs represented, a boy drowning in privilege, devoid of purpose. "I'm not here for your inheritance, Mark," Liam said, his voice laced with pity rather than anger. "I'm here for answers, and for justice." "Justice?" Mark scoffed, taking another long swig from his glass. "What do you know about justice, street rat? You think you can just waltz in here and take what's mine?" A sharp crack echoed as Mr. Huang slammed his hand on the desk. "Mark! That's enough!" But the damage was done. The fragile truce shattered. Mark's venomous words, born of insecurity and resentment, revealed the toxic undercurrents of the Huang family. Liam, despite his anger, felt a strange pull of responsibility. This was his brother, broken by the very environment that now sought to reclaim him. He knew what it felt like to be abandoned, albeit in a different way. "You're not what you think." "You are, Mark," Liam said, his voice calm yet piercing. "And neither is this family. You're both trapped, but you don't have to be." He was extending an olive branch, a path to redemption that Mark, blinded by his own pain, was too proud to see. Meanwhile, the revelation about Mia's true identity, her being Mia Huang, reverberated with a different kind of shock. She had quietly stood by, observing the tense confrontation, her face pale. Now she stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Liam, I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell you. I just didn't know how." Her eyes, once so open and inviting, now held a deep, self-reproaching guilt. Liam turned to her, his expression a complex mix of hurt and bewilderment. "You knew Mia? All this time? You knew who they were, and you let me believe you were just a friend?" The betrayal cut deep, like a jagged shard of glass. Their friendship, once a comforting haven, now felt like a meticulously crafted illusion. "I didn't know how to tell you without hurting you," she confessed, tears now streaming freely down her face. "My parents were so secretive. I only began to suspect recently, when their investigation became more intense, and then when they started talking about your project." Her voice broke, a raw sob escaping her lips. "I was terrified of losing you, Liam, of what this truth would do to us." Her honesty, raw and painful, softened the edges of Liam's anger, replacing it with a profound sorrow. He saw her struggle, caught between the loyalty to her family and the blossoming friendship she cherished. "But you kept it from me," he whispered, the words laced with profound disappointment. "You let me confide in you. Let me rely on you." Knowing this sword was hanging over my head, the air between them crackled with unspoken accusations and profound regret. Their relationship, once a beacon of genuine connection, was now a fragile, shattered mosaic. Mia was not just his friend. She was his sister, bound by a bloodline he had never known, a bloodline that was stained with the very pain she now inflicted. The intricate dance of their evolving relationship, once effortless, became a torturous tango of fractured trust and unspoken grievances. The confrontation with the Huangs had opened a Pandora's box. Not only was Liam forced to confront his painful past, but he was also thrust into the complicated, often toxic dynamics of a family he never knew he had. The fight for Mrs. Land's justice, the unexpected bond with Mark, and the profound rupture with Mia. All these threads began to weave a complex tapestry of loyalty, betrayal, and burgeoning responsibility. Liam, the boy who had once only yearned for knowledge and the simple joy of making Mrs. Land proud, now found himself at the epicenter of a family drama far more intricate and demanding than any code he had ever written. His journey, once a solitary climb towards academic success, had dramatically veered into a treacherous path of uncovering family secrets and forging a new, uncertain identity. The truth was out, but its consequences were only just beginning to unfold. promising a storm far greater than any he had ever weathered. The revelation had cleaved Liam's world in two, leaving a raw, gaping wound where trust and simplicity once resided. Mrs. Land's successful surgery, paid for by the startup, prize, offered a fleeting balm, but the emotional scars lingered, pulsating with the memory of abandonment and betrayal. The Huang dynasty, now stripped of their anonymity, pressed their claim, their pleas for forgiveness echoing through the grand halls of their mansion like a hollow wind. They offered a legacy, a name, a destiny carved from unimaginable wealth and power. But for Liam, these were mere gilded chains. He stood on the precipice of a decision that would redefine his entire existence. The path to the Huang Empire was paved with power, influence, and the chance to reshape a crumbling dynasty. He could be Liam Huang, the forgotten heir, reclaiming his birthright. Yet the thought felt like a betrayal of his true mother, Mrs. Lan, whose love, forged in the crucible of hardship, felt more real than any blood tie. His heart ached, torn between the pull of duty to a family he barely knew and the unwavering loyalty to the woman who had truly raised him. Mia, a silent observer in the aftermath of the truth, became a fragile bridge between his two worlds. Her initial guilt had morphed into a quiet, unwavering resolve. She visited Mrs. Lan, humbly offering assistance, her presence a soft counterpoint to the Huang's more formal overtures. She also spent countless hours with Liam, not pleading, but listening, understanding the profound chasm that had opened between them. Their conversations were no longer light and academic. They were raw, often punctuated by silences heavier than any words. She showed him the cracks in the Huang facade, the internal pressures, the genuine, albeit flawed, remorse of their parents. "They're broken, Liam," she admitted one evening, her voice barely a whisper. "As broken as the family they created. Mark, he's a symptom of their neglect, just like you were a casualty." Her honesty, a stark contrast to the layers of deception, began to chip away at Liam's icy resolve, allowing a sliver of empathy to penetrate. The pivotal moment arrived not in a grand boardroom, but in Mrs. Lan's modest hospital room. Mr. and Mrs. Huang, accompanied by Mia, stood awkwardly by the bedside. Mrs. Lan, though frail, possessed a quiet dignity that dwarfed their inherited grandeur. Mr. Huang, usually so commanding, cleared his throat, his gaze fixed on Mrs. Lan. "Mrs. Lan," he began, his voice thick with unaccustomed humility, We owe you a profound apology for our actions, for the pain we caused, for abandoning our son, and for the burden we unknowingly placed upon you. Your selfless love gave him the life we denied. We can never repay you." Mrs. Huang, her eyes glistening, added, "You are a true mother, Mrs. Lan, a better one than we ever were." Mrs. Lan, her hand gently clasped in Liam's, simply nodded, a serene acceptance on her face. "He is a good boy," she said, her voice soft but clear, her gaze sweeping over Liam with boundless affection. "That is all that matters." Her forgiveness, unspoken yet palpable, hung in the air, a potent balm to their wounded souls. It was in that small, humble room, amidst the scent of medicine and the quiet hum of life support, that the Huang dynasty, for the first time in 2 decades, truly knelt, not to power, but to the pure, unadulterated strength of a mother's love. Liam watched this exchange, a storm raging within him. The sight of his biological parents, humbled and remorseful, coupled with Mrs. Lan's quiet grace, began to shift the tectonic plates of his heart. The anger, once a raging fire, began to subside, replaced by a complex tapestry of emotions: sadness, a flicker of understanding, and a dawning sense of purpose. His own reconciliation with Mia was a slow, delicate dance. She didn't press him, but her unwavering presence, her genuine remorse, and her shared understanding of the Huang family's dysfunctional legacy slowly rebuilt the fragile bridge of trust. "We can fix this, Liam," she had said one night, her voice filled with a quiet strength. Not just for us, but for all of them. For Mark. For the future of a family that needs you more than you know. The ultimate decision still weighed heavily. The Huang legacy, a leviathan of wealth and power, beckoned. But his heart, nurtured by Mrs. Lon, refused to simply step into a role dictated by blood. He needed to forge his own path, one that honored both his past and his future. The climax arrived in a private, high-stakes meeting with the Huang Board of Directors, orchestrated by Mr. Huang himself. Liam, armed with his intellect and newfound resolve, laid out his terms. He would not simply inherit, he would reform. He would demand transparency, ethical practices, and a commitment to social responsibility, a direct antithesis to the ruthless, image-obsessed values that had defined the dynasty. He proposed a radical restructuring of the Huang Foundation, shifting its focus from superficial philanthropy to genuine community development, particularly in underserved areas, the very places he had grown up. He demanded a seat on the board, not as a figurehead, but with executive power to implement these changes. He also insisted on a structured program to rehabilitate Mark, not just financially, but emotionally and professionally, offering his brother a chance to find his own purpose. The board members, steeped in tradition and profit margins, initially balked. The tension in the room was electric, a battle between old power and new vision. Liam, however, stood firm, his voice resonating with an authority that stunned them. He outlined not just the moral imperative, but the strategic brilliance of his vision, using his EcoFlow AI as a prime example of how innovation, combined with social good, could create unprecedented value. He spoke of legacy not as inherited wealth, but as the positive impact left on the world. He was a force of nature, a mind honed by adversity, and he presented an undeniable argument. Mr. Huang, watching his son, felt a surge of pride unlike any he had ever known. This was the true heir, the leader he had unknowingly discarded. He stepped in, his voice ringing with renewed conviction. My son's vision is not just the future of the Huang dynasty, it is the future of business itself. We will follow his lead. His words, a final public acceptance of Liam, sealed the deal. Mark, surprisingly, offered less resistance than expected. Liam, seeing the brokenness beneath the bluster, had approached him not with judgment but with a quiet offer of help. You don't have to be this person, Mark, Liam had told him. You can choose differently. I'm here to help, not to replace you. The raw, unexpected empathy chipped away at Mark's resentment, allowing a flicker of hope to ignite. Liam guided Mark into a role within the reformed Huang Foundation, focusing on sustainable urban development, a space where Mark's neglected intellect could find purpose. It was a long, arduous journey for Mark, but Liam's unwavering support, a lifeline he'd never expected from his forgotten brother, eventually guided him toward a path of genuine contribution. Liam's choice was not to fully abandon his past, nor to fully embrace the Huang legacy without condition. He remained steadfastly devoted to Mrs. Lon, ensuring her comfort and care, visiting her daily, his hand always in hers. He integrated her quiet wisdom into his corporate philosophy, viewing resourcefulness and compassion as cornerstones of true success. He became Liam Huang, the CEO, the innovator, but also the son of a scavenger, forever grounded by the lessons learned under a bridge. The Huang dynasty, under his radical, ethical leadership, began a slow, deliberate transformation. The gleaming towers of their empire became symbols not just of wealth, but of responsibility. Mrs. Lon, once the forgotten rescuer, was publicly honored, her story woven into the very fabric of the Huang Foundation's new mission. Mia, now a formidable ally, worked alongside Liam, her sharp business acumen and ethical compass guiding their shared vision. Their relationship, scarred but resilient, blossomed into a profound, unbreakable bond of siblinghood, forged in the fires of shared truth and collective purpose. The final scene sees Liam standing on the rooftop of the newly rebranded Huang Tower. The city lights stretched out before him, a tapestry of human endeavor. he wasn't alone. Mrs. Lane sat beside him, wrapped in a warm blanket, her eyes twinkling. Mia stood nearby, a confident smile on her face, and even Mark, looking healthier and more purposeful, shared a quiet moment with them. The once fragmented family, once a monument to cold ambition, was slowly, painstakingly, becoming something new, a testament to redemption, forgiveness, and the profound, enduring power of love. Liam, the Forgotten Heir, had not only reclaimed his birthright, but had redefined it, proving that true legacy is built not on what you possess, but on the lives you touch, the compassion you extend, and the values you uphold. The shadow had vanished, replaced by a radiant light, not just from the city below, but from the hearts finally made whole. A final thought for our audience. As The Forgotten Heir draws to a close, we're left with a powerful message. Liam's journey reminds us that true family isn't always defined by blood, but by unwavering love and sacrifice. It highlights the profound impact of kindness, showing how Mrs. Lane's selfless act transformed a discarded life into a beacon of hope and innovation. The story also challenges us to reflect on redemption and forgiveness, proving that even the most profound mistakes can be overcome with genuine remorse and a willingness to change. Ultimately, it's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the idea that our true worth lies not in status or wealth, but in our capacity for compassion and integrity. If this story resonated with you, please consider giving it a like, subscribing to our channel for more compelling narratives, and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. Your support truly makes a difference. Thank you for listening.